How's it going, everybody? Welcome to We Do Tech, and also to my look at the brand new Aero 16 from Gigabyte and also their new Aero range. Now, I have actually taken a look at 5 Aero laptops over the last 4 years, and I have loved every single one of them. And I actually even own the previous Aero 15 OLED, which is right there, which is just a dream. Honestly, I edited a lot of videos on that, and the OLED display is just breathtaking. And of course, we have it on the new version as well. But anyway, Gigabyte has made a couple of upgrades, which I do think the majority of users will appreciate. There's just one small thing that I didn't like that much, but everything else is awesome. Now, with these new Aero laptops, Gigabyte is giving us more options. Now, like usual, you have your different CPUs, GPUs, combos, and all of that. But the biggest difference again is that now with the 16 model, you do get 2 different versions with the 4K OLED model, which again I have here, and also the new 2K 165 Hz model, which is more a balance between gaming and then also productivity. So I think for like YouTubers and so on, it's going to work perfectly together on as well. But not only that, of course, Gigabyte also released the new Aero 17, which is just the bigger boy, which just has bonkers specs, really. It comes maxed out with all of the latest mobile graphics and CPUs and everything, but it comes in a 17-inch 4K mini LED HDR 1000 120 Hz display, which again, 4K 120 on a laptop. Bonkers. So if you want to check those out, you can, but we're going to continue with our Aero OLED 4K model because it certainly does not disappoint. Now, jumping into the specs of our Aero 16 here, it does come again with a few different models, but we have the fully spec'd out one with the 14-core 20-thread i9-12900HK, an RTX 3080 Ti in such a thin body. It also comes with 32 gigs of DDR5 memory running at 4800 megahertz, and then lastly for storage you get a 1 terabyte and also a 2 terabyte PCI Express for 2nd generation NVMe SSDs. Then finally, for the price point, it's not going to be cheap. The Aero 16 comes in a starting price of $2,200 and goes up to $4,400 for my model, and unfortunately I wasn't able to find it here in South Africa yet, so it's going to be quite expensive, but we'll see. And from all of my testing, it's definitely worth that. And of course, you don't have to go for the top of the range model. There are others, but it's fully spec'd out. It's amazing. We'll get into the performance later on. But anyway, again, it isn't cheap, but the Aero range has always been a superb choice for content creators looking for a max performance in a thin and a light body. All of those specs, the 3080 Ti and everything, in a body that's only 22 millimeters thick and weighs 2.3 kilograms, around like 5 pounds. That's astonishing. Now, one of the biggest differences with the new Aeros is that they come in this new silver design that does look very clean and actually does a very good job at preventing fingerprints. And also, it still uses an aluminum shell that feels even more premium than the previous models, and that's honestly saying something. Now, at also the back of the display, you do get that white Aero logo, which does still look very stylish, especially in the newer white, and doesn't draw too much attention, especially with the white on silver. Now, Gigabyte did get rid of the number plate style Aero badge at the bottom back, which I did find look pretty cool, but it does keep with the more sleek design of the white and silver look. Now then, moving on to I/O. So this is where Gigabyte probably made the biggest change. And unfortunately, I'm not the biggest fan, but it might be fine for some other users. So instead of having a full set of I/O, you only get 3 USB Type-C ports, a combo jack, and also your DC power. There's not even a Kensington lock. I don't really care about that, but some might. But that's how limited it is. A very MacBook stylish, I would say. Now, it's not all bad news, as 2 of the USB Type-Cs on the right side is a Thunderbolt 4, with one of them supporting over 100 watts of power delivery for external displays. The Type-C on the left is a more normal USB 3.2 Gen 2 10 gigabit ports. But Gigabyte does understand that that's not enough, so they did include a USB Type-C hub that gives you some additional ports. It does sit pretty flush with the body. It's designed to go with the body, of course, but depending on which side, and some of it covers some of the air ventilation and so on, but it does work. I'm just not the biggest fan of it because it does, again, not enough ports. And then also, if you do pull it, it actually makes a gap between the body on the side that doesn't have the connector port. So they did also include a short Type-C extender cable, but it's still not enough for me. Now, speaking of the ports, it only has an HDMI, mini display port, USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A port, and also an RJ45 gigabit port. Now, also for the best possible connection options, it is recommended to use it on a Thunderbolt 4 port, which is on the right side. So all of your cables will be in the way of your mouse because it just stands out more and more and more. And I really don't like everything on the right side. It gets really in the way. Now, technically, that's enough ports, but I did find myself needing a minimum of 3 USB Type A ports because not everything is Type-C yet. So I actually did need an additional hub for most of my use cases, some recordings and so on. Now, that's just me. Not everybody will need all of those USBs. Some people might have everything wireless, Bluetooth, and so on. I even use wireless mice, but they're still normal Type A USB. So again, that's just me. Some people might not have the issue. It was a big issue for me, but I just know I'm going to have an additional 2 hubs that I will need to carry around. But that's it. But let's move on towards my favorite part of this laptop, and that has to be the display, which is also quite different. Now, you can still lift it up with a single finger, just with your pinky, but also it's stiff enough to prevent the screen from wobbling around thanks to the new hinge design. That was a problem with my previous Aero 15. Now, you do also have a little ledge for a grip, and I did move the webcam from the bottom nostril angle, putting into your nose, to the top, and it still keeps the bezels really, really thin. Now, then quickly for the webcam's quality and also the microphone quality isn't the best. It's a bit grainy. I have 2 good lights shining on me, and you guys can see it's not the best, but it's usable if you want to use it for a bit of zoom sessions or so on. I do like again that it's at the top instead of at the bottom pointing into your nose. As for the microphone quality, I wasn't that much impressed. It's a dual array mic, but it does pick up a lot of noise, and actually picked up the fans are ramping up in the chassis, which you don't really want that, but it did. So it's good enough, but I would still say rather get something external microphone or earbuds or something like that if you want to record it, but the image quality is fine for a Zoom session. So yeah. Just like the name implies, this is the new 16-inch model instead of the 15 or 17.3 inch, which actually does give you an aspect ratio of a 16 by 10 and a resolution of 3840 by 2400. So it's a tiny bit taller. This model also features a Samsung AMOLED panel that is truly amazing. Now, if you have not used or seen an OLED panel before, then you really need to, because it's the only way to really see the quality. The colors are so vibrant and the blacks are just deep, a true black. Now, you also do get actually HDR 500 true black for beta dynamic range as well. And this model is also pre-calibrated by X-Rite and Pantone for optimal color accuracy with a 100% DCI-P3 coverage. And also from some of the testing that I've seen, unfortunately I don't have a calibrator, it's also 99 to 100% for Adobe RGB and also sRGB as well. Now, like I mentioned before, this is only the 60Hz model, but you do get the 120Hz 4K 17-inch and also the 2K 16-inch 165Hz model. So you have options. But for a content creator, this is, again, just honestly a dream. I've been editing a ton of videos on my Aero 15 OLED and also a few of the recent videos on this one as well. And I just love it. It's so smooth and everything looks amazing. Again, it's the OLED display, it's amazing. Now, even watching just a 4K of movies like in a bed, it was just fun, especially if you can get a proper 4K 40 gig video, then it looks astonishing. Now moving on to the keyboard, it is the same as on the previous models, but without the numpad now. This time, however, is only a white backlit, but it still has a firm but silent key press. And also, after almost a year on the 15 with the same keyboard, I've not had any issues till date. Now, as for the trackpad, it is slightly larger and the fingerprint reader has been removed, but it still feels the same with a very good and smooth, precise tracking. Now then, moving on to the speakers, you do get a 2-watt top firing speakers instead of bottom firing on some of the previous models, and it is actually surprisingly loud and crisp, but unfortunately there is no sub, which does mean bass was lacking a tiny bit, but you have your headphones, you have probably a decent set of speakers anyway, so no problem there. Now then, just before we get into the performance, let's quickly talk about cooling, because that's usually a problem for these thin and light high performance laptops. Now then, on idle, it hovered around 40 degrees for both the CPU and GPU. Now the fans on idle and on eco mode is very pleasant. You can't even hear it back there. So you can slightly hear a hum. If you do use it a bit more, the fans will ramp up a bit. All right, so this is how loud the fans get on a turbo mode, so on its max. So definitely it does get loud, but it keeps it nice and cool, and you'll still be able to hear yourself think. It's not that loud. Also, you do have a few different profiles that you can choose from. Turbo mode's max, gaming mode, the eco mode to keep it nice and quiet as well. Definitely say use that if you are going to just do normal office work, because the fan curve does ramp up quite quickly to keep it nice and cool. So definitely take a look at that, but you do have a couple of options there. Now, when running a CPU-only Blender benchmark, the CPU jumped up to the mid-80s at an average of 3.7 GHz on the performance cores and 2.7 on the efficient cores. In games, it did jump into the 90s, but also at 4.6 GHz then, where it wasn't then you really used that much in games. Now then, as for the GPU in gaming and also on the gaming profile, it reached 80 degrees, but on a max fan speed, it ranged around the lower 70s. But of course, then it does get pretty loud, so use headphones if you want to game on that then. So then jumping into the performance, again, I do have the RTX 3080 Ti model with an i9-12900HK. I tested some games in a 4K on the native resolution, but in honesty, most likely I'll play it in a 1080p, so to get that extra frames, because the display is already so crisp, you don't really need to go for the 4K in games. The amount of frames that you lose isn't really worth it, especially on the smaller display, but you are able to run pretty much all of the games on max settings and a range between frames of 78 to 302 in 1080p and 34 to 113 FPS in 4K with the help of a DLSS. But of course, you can just drop some of the settings in 4K to get better frames. Now, in Firestrike and Time Spy, the 16 showed who is a boss again, easily beating out all of the other laptops that I tested. And I'm actually really impressed with the 3080 Ti in such a thin body and only running at around like a quarter of its desktop equivalent power draw, was around 90 watts. Now, in a Cinebench R23, the 12900HK really surprised me, beating out the desktop 11900K by 1200 points in multi-core. It's still a long way from the i7-12700K, but it still really impressed me. Now, in the Geekbench R5, it also did really well there, beating all of the previous laptops that I have tested. And then for a Blender, same thing here, beating out all of the previous laptops and only losing to the desktop i7-12700K. So that's it for CPU and a GPU benchmarks. Again, astonishing actually how good it did. But for the SSDs, you do get two second generation PCI Express 4 NVMe SSDs that reach speeds up to 7,000 megabytes a second. Now, finally, for battery life, you do get a quite a large 230 watt power adapter and a 99 watt hour battery. The battery lasted 1 hour and 25 minutes in gaming and around 4 hours and 45 minutes in office work. So then in conclusion, the new Aero 16 is probably my new favorite laptop. It's just of the upgrades that they made between like my Aero and the new one, I honestly want one. It's so good. I also actually like the white design more than the black. It does keep it more sleek. I do like it. Now, the great thing is that you have more options again. Now with the Aero ranges 16-inch models, you have two, and then also the 17-inch. But now for the model that I have, which honestly I probably wouldn't buy because it's going to be too expensive for me, but I'm really impressed with the 12900HK, even beating out the desktop 11900K. That's really, really good. And of course, just that beautiful display, which makes everything else just kind of look washed out. All of my other displays, even my TV, doesn't look that good. And there's a pretty nice TV that I have. So for any content creators looking for a new system, this should definitely be a top on your list for a new system. But like I mentioned a lot of times, there are other models that you can check out as well. But anyway, that's pretty much it for my look at the new Aero 618 4K OLED version. Now, if you guys want to get it for yourself, I will leave links in the video description. A big thanks to Gigabyte South Africa for sending it over for a review. Now, if you guys did enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and comment like always, and I'll check all of you next time. Cheers, guys.